The morning Iris Callahan walked into the Whitmore estate, she told herself it was just a job. She needed the money. Her mother's medication wasn't free, the rent on their apartment in Barrie wasn't cheap, and the employment agency had called at 7 in the morning with an offer she couldn't reasonably refuse. Live-in caregiver for a man recovering from a severe accident. Private residence outside Toronto. Salary generous enough to make her pause. She didn't ask too many questions. She should have. The estate sat at the end of a private road lined with birch trees that had already started turning in the September cold. The house itself was the kind of place that made you feel underdressed just looking at it. All stone and glass and deliberate silence. A housekeeper named Miss Alderton met Iris at the front door, handed her a lanyard, and walked her through the ground floor with the efficiency of someone who had given this tour many times and found it tiresome. Mr. Whitmore sustained a traumatic brain injury 8 months ago, Mrs. Alderton said, not breaking stride. He was in a coma for 11 weeks. When he woke, his long-term memory was significantly impaired. He recognizes faces he's known for years, but events, conversations, agreements, much of it is gone. He's physically recovered. Cognitively, he has good days and difficult ones. What does a difficult day look like? Iris asked. Mrs. Alderton glanced at her sideways. He doesn't always trust what people tell him, which is, the doctors say, medically appropriate. They stopped at the door to a sitting room at the back of the house. Through the glass, Iris could see a man standing at the window with his back to them, hands in the pockets of dark trousers, looking out at the ravine below. "That's Cole Whitmore," Mrs. Alderton said quietly. "I'll leave the introduction to you." She walked away before Iris could ask anything else. Iris opened the door. Cole didn't turn when she entered. He was taller than she'd expected, with the kind of posture that came from being used to occupying space. His left hand had a faint tremor she noticed only because she was trained to notice things like that. "Mr. Whitmore," she said. "I'm Iris Callahan. The agency sent me." A pause. Then, "How old are you?" 28 previous experience. 4 years as a registered practical nurse. 2 years in home care. I have my references in my bag if you'd like. I don't want references. He turned then, and she got her first look at his face. He was somewhere in his early 40s, dark-eyed, with a scar that ran from his left temple back into his hairline. Still pink, still new enough to remind you it hadn't happened that long ago. His expression was the kind that had been arranged into blankness so many times it had nearly become permanent. "I want to know why someone your age is doing this kind of work. You could be doing almost anything else." Iris held his gaze. "I could say the same about you. You could be anywhere else. But here you are, in a house in the middle of nowhere, asking a stranger about her career choices." Something shifted in his face, not quite a smile, more like the distant recognition that one might be possible somewhere in the future. "Fair enough," he said. "You can put your things in the East Wing." She learned the shape of Cole's days quickly. He woke early, around 5, before the house had any light. He drank his coffee on the back deck regardless of the temperature, which in September meant he sometimes came back inside with his knuckles red. He spent the mornings in his office, the door usually closed, sometimes open, working on things he didn't explain and that Iris didn't ask about. He had physical therapy on Tuesdays and Thursdays with a man named Gary who came to the house and left Cole visibly drained and short-tempered for the rest of the afternoon. He was not an easy person to be around. He was demanding in the quiet way that was somehow harder to manage than open anger, long silences, expectations he never stated aloud, a habit of watching her in a way she couldn't entirely read. But he was not cruel. In her experience, that was worth something. What she noticed in those early weeks was that Cole paid attention to everything. He noticed when she moved his coffee cup 2 inches to the left. He noticed when she changed which chair she sat in during their evening check-ins. He cataloged small details with an intensity that seemed almost involuntary, like a reflex left over from whoever he'd been before the accident. She told herself this was the brain injury. She'd read about it. Some patients with memory impairment compensated by developing heightened attention to the present, to sensory cues, to the immediate environment. It made sense. It was clinical. It had nothing to do with her specifically. She told herself this for about 3 weeks. Then his brother arrived. Preston Whitmore came on a Thursday afternoon in late September, driving a car that cost more than Iris would earn in 3 years. He was 6 years younger than Cole, with their mother's coloring and their father's jawline and a handshake that felt like a performance. He brought their sister Margot with him, sharp-faced, careful-eyed, wearing a coat that Iris recognized as expensive in the way that required you to already know it was expensive. They sat with Cole in the front room for an hour. Iris stayed in the kitchen, not listening, except that the house was old and the walls were what they were, and she couldn't entirely help it. "The board is getting anxious," Preston said. "They need reassurance that you're progressing." "I'm progressing," Cole said. "You haven't been in the office in 8 months. I've been unconscious for a significant portion of that." "Cole." Margot's voice was measured. "We're not your enemies. We're trying to protect what you built. There are decisions that need to be made. The Glenmore acquisition, the Vancouver property holdings. These things have been in limbo. People are getting nervous." "Let them be nervous," Cole said. "I'll come back when I come back." There was a pause. "There's another option," Preston said. "You could sign a temporary transfer of authority, just until you're fully—" "No, Cole." "I said no, Preston. That's still a word I remember how to use." When they left 2 hours later, Preston paused in the hallway where Iris was reviewing medication schedules. He smiled at her, the careful, evaluating kind. "You're the new caregiver," he said. "Yes. How is he, really?" "You can tell me. I'm his brother." Iris looked at him steadily. "He's doing well. Any questions about his condition should go through his medical team." Preston's smile didn't waver. "Of course. Thank you, Iris." He left. She stood in the hallway for a moment afterward with a feeling she couldn't name. Something low in her stomach, something alert. She wrote nothing down. She filed it away. Cole didn't mention the visit that evening. He came to dinner quieter than usual and ate without looking at his plate, and when Iris asked, carefully, professionally, if he wanted to discuss anything, he said no, and she respected that. But the next morning, he asked her something unexpected. "How much do you actually know about Whitmore Capital?" She was checking his blood pressure. She kept her eyes on the monitor. "Not much. I know it's an investment firm. I know you built it from your father's initial holdings. Did you read that somewhere? Mrs. Alderton mentioned it when I arrived. Also, I have a phone and basic curiosity." He was quiet for a moment. "My father died 6 years ago. He left the company to me. Preston was given a significant stake, but I had controlling interest." He paused. "I remember that clearly. Some things I remember very clearly. That's not unusual with BI," she said, still watching the monitor. "Older memories, especially emotionally significant ones, often survive better than recent ones." "The accident was 8 months ago," he said. "The week before it happened, the week is almost entirely gone. There are maybe 4 hours I can account for." He looked at her. "Does that seem strange to you?" Retrograde amnesia around a traumatic event is extremely common. The memory consolidation process is disrupted. It doesn't necessarily mean, "I know what the doctors say." His voice was even. "I'm asking what you think." She set down the blood pressure cuff. "I think that when people are frightened, they sometimes try to interpret gaps as answers, and sometimes gaps are just gaps." He studied her for a long moment. "You're careful," he said. "More careful than you need to be for a caregiver." She picked up her clipboard. "I'll see you at lunch." She found the first piece of it by accident. It was a Tuesday in October, 3 weeks after the visit from Preston and Margot's. Iris had gone to the study to bring Cole his afternoon medication and found the door open, the room empty. His laptop was on the desk, angled in her direction, the screen still lit. She wasn't trying to see it, but she saw it. It was a document. A draft, from what she could tell, heavily formatted, the kind of thing produced by legal teams. Her eye caught a few words before she looked away. Temporary transfer of executive authority, psychological incapacity, in the interests of the company and its stakeholders. She set the medication on the side table, left the room, and didn't think about it for the rest of the afternoon. At least, that was what she told herself. At 11 that night, lying in the east wing with the window cracked against the unseasonable warmth, she thought about it instead. She thought about Preston's handshake. She thought about Margot's careful eyes. She thought about Cole standing at the window on her first morning, hands in his pockets, alone in a house built for more people than were in it. She thought about the way he noticed everything and said very little. She wondered if he was more aware of what was happening around him than anyone believed. The second piece came from Mrs. Alderton, who was not a woman given to gossip, but who, on an evening in late October, poured herself a cup of tea and sat down across from Iris at the kitchen table and said, "I've worked for this family for 19 years. Iris waited. "Cole's father, Martin Whitmore, built this company from almost nothing. When he was dying, he told me in this kitchen, at this table, that he'd made provisions to make sure Preston never controlled the company alone." Mrs. Alderton's hands were wrapped around her mug. He was afraid of what Preston would do with it. He'd seen it. The way Preston made decisions. She paused. "And now Cole is diminished, they say. Now there are documents. You've seen the documents." "Preston left a copy in the front room, probably by accident. I put it back where he'd left it." She looked at Iris. "I don't know what to do with what I know." "You know more than you've told me," Iris said. Mrs. Alderton was quiet for a moment. "The accident," she said finally. "Cole's accident. He was driving back from a meeting in Muskoka. A truck ran a red light and hit the driver's side at a substantial speed. There was an inquiry." She stopped. "And the truck's brake line had been tampered with. It was ruled inconclusive. The driver had a history of vehicle neglect, but—" She set down her mug. "But Cole had told someone the week before that he was planning to have Preston's stake reviewed. He believed Preston had been misrepresenting portfolio decisions to the board." Iris sat with that. "Mrs. Alderton," she said, "why are you telling me this?" The older woman looked at her directly for the first time. "Because you're the only person in this house who doesn't want something from him." The thing about dramatic irony, and Iris would think about this later, much later, when the whole shape of it had become visible, is that it's only dramatic in retrospect. When you're inside it, it feels like anxiety. She started paying attention differently, not intrusively. She was a professional and she had no intention of overstepping. But she listened more carefully to the sounds of the house. She noted when Preston called and how long the calls lasted. She noticed that Margot's had begun stopping by more frequently, often when Cole's cognitive therapist, Dr. Reyes, had just left, as if timed for the moments when Cole was most fatigued. She noticed that someone had been in her room. Not ransacked. Nothing was missing. But she kept her personal items in a specific order, a habit from years of living in shared spaces, and the order had been disturbed. Subtly. The kind of disturbed that someone careless might not catch. She bought a small, inexpensive camera, the kind designed for pet monitoring, and put it on the shelf with her nursing manuals. She pointed it at the door. She didn't tell Cole. She didn't tell Cole because she wasn't sure yet, and because she was aware, with some discomfort, that what she felt toward him had begun to shift from professional to something that didn't have a clean clinical category, and she didn't trust herself to separate those threads cleanly yet. It was November when she came downstairs at 2 a.m. and found Cole in the kitchen. He was sitting at the table in the dark with a glass of water, not drinking it, just sitting with it. He looked up when she came in. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Me neither." She poured herself water and sat down across from him. Neither of them said anything for a while. The house made its sounds around them, the settling, the wind against the north-facing windows. "I'm going to ask you something," Cole said, "and I'd like you to answer it honestly, even if you think I can't handle it." "Okay. Do you think I'm getting better?" Iris considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Cognitively, yes. Your recall of recent events has improved significantly in the 8 weeks I've been here. Your concentration is better. The aphasia episodes are less frequent." She paused. "The memory gaps around the accident are likely permanent." "That's normal. That's not what I'm asking." He turned the water glass slowly in his hands. "I'm asking if you think I'm capable of running something, of making decisions, of knowing when I'm being handled." She looked at him across the dark kitchen table. "Yes," she said. "I think you're entirely capable of all of those things." He held her gaze. "Then why is there a document in my study that my brother wants me to sign that says I'm not?" The silence that followed lasted long enough to be significant. "I've seen the document," Iris said carefully. "I know you have." His voice was even. "I left it there on purpose." She felt something fall into place. Not with shock, more with the quiet certainty of a thing you'd known was there, now confirmed. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Known what, specifically?" "That you're not as impaired as everyone believes." Cole set down his water glass. "The memory gaps are real," he said. "The week before the accident, that's genuinely gone. But everything since I woke up?" He paused. "The doctors told me early on that one of the best things I could do for recovery was rest, reduce stress, and observe. Remove myself from the demands of the situation. A beat. I took that advice very seriously. Iris absorbed this. You've been watching. People behave differently around someone they think can't remember. They're careless. They say things. He looked at her. My brother has had 3 conversations in this house that he believed were private. 2 on his phone, 1 with Margot's in the guest wing. Mrs. Alderton informed me of the general content, but she didn't have specifics. And the document? My lawyers received a copy through back channels. Preston submitted it to the board last week as a preliminary filing. He needs my signature to formalize it, but he's already been behaving as though it's a done thing. Cole's jaw tightened slightly. He scheduled a board meeting for December 3rd. I found out through my CFO, who was, incidentally, the first person to call me directly in 8 months rather than going through Preston. So what are you going to do? He looked at her for a long moment. That depends, he said, on what you found on the camera you put in your room. Iris stared at him. How did you? I have a security system, he said without apology. It covers the interior of the house as well as the exterior. I can see every room. A pause. I saw your room had been entered. I also saw you purchase the camera at the pharmacy in town. I thought it was a reasonable precaution. You could have told me. I could have. I was watching to see what you'd do, he said it plainly without evasion. I needed to know if you were working with them. Iris sat with the discomfort of that. She couldn't entirely blame him. In his position with his history, trust had to be earned through evidence, not sentiment. There's footage, she said, from 4 days ago. Margot came into my room when I was in with your physical therapist. She went through my phone. She couldn't get into it and looked through my notebook. She paused. I have a page where I'd written some notes to myself. Observations about the visits, about the pattern of when Preston and Margot's came and how they timed it. She knows you're paying attention. She suspects it. She doesn't know how much. Cole nodded slowly. My CFO, a woman named Angela Yoon, is coming here on Friday. She's bringing the company's legal counsel. I'm going to present to the board remotely on December 3rd, before Preston has a chance to convene his version of the meeting. He paused. I need someone to be here who can verify, if it becomes necessary, that what they've witnessed in this house aligns with what I'm going to tell the board about my condition and my capacity. You want me to testify to your cognitive state. His voice was steady. I also want you to testify to what you observed about Preston and Margot's behavior. The visits, the timing, the document, and the camera footage. That's a significant thing to ask of an employee. I know. He didn't minimize it. I can arrange a different employment contract if you're willing. Something with proper legal protections for you, not just the agency placement. Iris looked at him across the table, the November dark outside the windows, the particular quiet of a house in which something important was about to happen. I don't need a better contract, she said. I need to know one thing. Ask it, the week you can't remember, the week before the accident. Is there anything from that week, any fragment, any feeling, that you think matters? Cole was quiet for a long time. Long enough that she began to think he wouldn't answer. There's one thing, he said finally. Not a memory, more like an impression. The feeling of having made a decision, something I'd been avoiding for a long time. He paused. I don't know what the decision was, but I remember the feeling of relief afterward, like I'd finally said something true. Iris held that. Then we protect that decision, she said. Whatever it was, we make sure whoever wanted to stop it doesn't get to. Angela Yoon arrived on Friday in a car with 2 lawyers and a quiet, precise energy that Iris liked immediately. The 4 of them sat in Cole's study for most of the day. Iris was in and out. Medication times, lunch, the small necessities of the job. But she caught fragments of what was being assembled. Evidence gathered over months. Documentation of decisions Preston had made in Cole's name. A record of communications. And, quietly, a private investigator's report on the accident. The brake failure had been re-examined. A second engineering assessment, commissioned by Angela without Preston's knowledge, had found evidence inconsistent with routine neglect. The findings were not conclusive enough for criminal proceedings, not yet, but they were enough to raise formal questions through the appropriate channels. Iris read enough of the summary to feel cold, and then set it down, and went to check on Cole's afternoon medication with steady hands. Preston arrived unannounced on a Tuesday, 3 days before the board meeting. He came with Margot and a lawyer Iris didn't recognize. young, uncomfortable looking, clearly aware he was present for something he hadn't been fully briefed on. They walked into the front room with the confidence of people who believed the outcome was settled. Cole was waiting for them. He was dressed the way Iris had never seen him dressed in the weeks she'd been there, properly, deliberately, in a way that communicated something. He was standing, not sitting. His posture had lost its careful neutrality. Mrs. Alderton showed Preston and Margot's in and then stepped aside. "Cole," Preston began, with the warm, practiced ease of someone who had spent considerable time in rooms making difficult things sound reasonable. "We wanted to come and talk through the December meeting before." "I know why you're here," Cole said. Preston's smile shifted almost imperceptibly. "We just want to make sure you're protected. The board needs reassurance, and if you're willing to sign the temporary transfer—" "I'm not signing anything." Cole's voice was level, not raised, not theatrical, just entirely certain. "And I'm not doing it because I'm cognitively impaired. I'm doing it because I know what the transfer actually is. And I know what you've been doing in my name for the past 8 months. And I know about the Glenmore accounts. And I know about the Vancouver meeting that wasn't on the record. And I know that you spoke to Martin Chi about quietly acquiring my shares." A pause. "Martin called me directly. 2 weeks ago. He thought I should know." Preston's expression had stopped moving. "My lawyers are filing documentation with the board today," Cole continued. "Angela Yoon has been appointed acting fiduciary pending the December meeting, where I will be presenting in person. If you'd like to dispute my cognitive capacity at that point, you're welcome to bring medical experts. I'll bring mine," Margot said, very quietly. "Cole, you don't understand what?" "I understand everything," he said. "I've had 8 months of bed rest and enforced quiet in which to understand it." He looked at his sister steadily. "I don't think you're a bad person, Margot. I think you let Preston convince you this was necessary. That's a different kind of mistake. But it's still a mistake, and I need you to understand that it's one I'm aware of." Margot went very still. The uncomfortable young lawyer had stopped pretending to take notes. Preston gathered himself with visible effort. "You're going to regret—" "The investigation into the accident is ongoing," Cole said. "I have nothing to say to you about that. Your lawyer has my lawyer's contact information. That's where this conversation ends." After they left, the house was quiet in a way that felt different from its usual quiet, cleaner, somehow. Less weighted. Iris found Cole in the kitchen afterward, standing at the counter, and she thought for a moment that the posture was different from the one she'd first seen on the morning she arrived. He was still, but not in the way of someone containing something. More like someone who had finally set something down. "How are you?" she asked. "Tired," he said honestly, in a way that feels appropriate. She put the kettle on. She made tea for both of them without asking, because by now she knew that he preferred it to coffee in the late afternoon. He watched her do it. "You're going to leave," he said. It wasn't a question, not quite. "The agency placement is for 6 months," she said. "But your medical needs don't require a live-in caregiver anymore. Honestly, they probably haven't for the past month. You know that. I know." She put the mugs on the table and sat down. He sat across from her, and for a moment they were back in the configuration of that November night, 2 in the morning, the house dark and significant around them. "There's something I want to tell you," Cole said. "Before you go, okay? The week I can't remember." He wrapped his hands around the mug. "I called my lawyers. Angela confirmed it. I made a change to my personal estate documentation that week, something I'd been putting off." He paused. "I'd been in a situation, for several years, that I stayed in past the point where it made sense. A relationship." He said the word with the careful neutrality of someone who had spent time finding the right one. "I'd ended it. I told my lawyers to make the relevant updates. And then 3 days later, I was in the accident." Iris was quiet. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," he said, which was not entirely true, and which they both knew was not entirely true. "I think you're telling me," she said slowly, "because you want me to know that the person you are right now isn't only the accident, that there were decisions you'd been making before." He looked at her. "Yes," he said. She held his gaze across the kitchen table. Outside, the November trees were bare. The first hard frost of the year was forecast for tonight, and the sky through the window had that particular steely gray white of a Canadian November afternoon that contained inside it the promise of a very long winter, and somehow, inexplicably, you didn't mind. "I'm going to go back to Barrie," Iris said. My mother needs me there, and I have some things I've been putting off too. I know, but I'll be in the city sometimes. I have a colleague who—" She stopped. She wasn't sure this was the right way to say it. Iris. His voice was quiet, not uncertain. I'm going to be in Barrie in January. There's a property I've been considering. I could use an honest opinion from someone who actually lives there. She looked at him for a moment, the careful way he'd said it, the scrupulous way he'd given her an exit, and also a door. I'll let you know if I'm available, she said. It wasn't a yes, but they both knew it wasn't a no either. And sometimes in a house full of people who had said too many things that weren't true, the truest thing you could offer was an honest maybe. Outside, the first snow of the season had begun to fall, quiet, unhurried, the kind that settles without making a sound.